mute yourself. And over to you, Joan.
Thank you, Phil. So this is a bit of a continuation of last week's. Last week we talked about being a healthy body weight, and in particular we talked about how controlling your blood sugar relates to that and isn't just a concern for diabetics. And I started off with blood sugar because there's so much to say on that topic in particular as it relates to weight loss, but there is more to weight loss or maintaining a healthy body weight than blood sugar as well. So this is today, I wanted to briefly do a recap of that just because it's so important and for people who weren't here, but then move on to some of those other factors as well and have a bit of a discussion of those. And we can also have a chat about any particular things that are causing confusion when it comes to weight loss, because I know it's a big concern for many people and a big topic. So just a quick recap, if I may, firstly on last week's. So we just discussed the links between body weight and arthritis, that obesity as well as an increased waist circumference in particular are increased risk factors for rheumatoid arthritis. And this increased waist circumference keeps cropping up again and again in lots of different chronic diseases, not just arthritis, because the fat around the middle is particularly inflammatory, causes inflammation. So if you tend to if women tend to put weight on, say, on their thighs or on their bum, that's less of a problem actually than if it's around the middle. So being apple-shaped is particularly problematic as opposed to being pear-shaped, because the fat elsewhere on the body doesn't have the same kind of inflammatory actions. Once arthritis is established, being obese decreases your chance of getting into remission in rheumatoid arthritis, and people who are obese tend to have worse disease activity scores and pain scores. It's sort of intuitive that in osteoarthritis, where a lot of the wear and tear tends to be on the weight-bearing joints, that weight loss can reduce pain. But weight puts additional load on painful joints. The reason we started talking about blood sugar balance is because glucocorticoids, if anyone's on something like prednisolone, they are acting like the stress hormone cortisol in the body. And the stress hormone cortisol has an effect of raising blood sugar in order to help us as humans supposedly cope with stress by having more energy, more blood sugar. We'll talk about that a bit later today. But it's for this reason that glucocorticoids often result in weight gain, because they cause people's blood glucose to be out of balance. So those were some of the links that we found between being overweight and arthritis. And then we talked about this complicated looking graph, which basically is time along the way and our blood sugar going up, and what happens if we eat different kinds of foods. If we eat quite a sugary food, the red line shows that our blood sugar goes up very quickly. When our blood sugar rises too much outside the zone between the green lines, we release insulin to try and reduce our blood sugar, and the red line drops again quite sharply and falls, and we end up being hungry. So if we eat something sugary, within about an hour or so we will have low blood sugar again, having been really high, then really low again, and we'll be hungry again. If we eat fast carbs, what we'll call fast carbs, so white flour products in particular, so pastries, white bread, white pasta, we have what's more like the yellow line, and the yellow line doesn't rise quite as fast as the red line, but our blood sugar still rises. We still release insulin when it gets too high, which causes it to fall again, and it falls in an hour or two. We will be hungry again as our blood sugar is too low. If we eat the complex carbohydrates that are found in whole grains, in vegetables, in root vegetables, and in pulses, that's chickpeas and lentils and beans, we'll get what happens with the pale blue line, which is where our blood sugar rises very, very gradually. It never really goes out of the healthy range that our body wants to keep it within, and it only falls again slowly. And we get to 3 or 4 hours between meals without low blood sugar that prompts hunger. So that's just how important it is to eat the right kind of foods that don't cause our blood sugar to spike. So there are two things that we need to be concerned about when our blood sugar spikes too fast. The first is that it will fall again very fast and leave us hungry. So if you eat foods that spike your blood sugar fast, you end up eating more because you feel shaky or dizzy or a bit faint or hungry, and you think there's something wrong with you, that you're getting low blood sugar, but it's probably just because you've had foods that are too sugary. So that's the first concern to do with weight. The second one is that when we get these blood sugar spikes, and where it says at the top of the graph, insulin, whenever our body produces insulin in response to high blood sugar, that signals our body to store the fuel that it's got as fat. So if we keep spiking our blood sugar and we keep releasing insulin, our body is continually primed to store our food as fat rather than to burn it off as fuel. So these repeated insulin spikes are really problematic when it comes to weight loss. So again, to get back to where we were last week, we talked about practical steps for getting out of this cycle. The first and most important being to get rid of sugar in foods and in drinks, but also it's a good idea to get rid of even the non-calorific artificial sweeteners as well, because they keep our body trapped in a cycle of expecting to have sugar, and they keep us craving sugar as well. So the more of the sweet stuff, whether it's sugar or something that's marketed as a healthier alternative like maple syrup, it still raises blood sugar. The fewer of those we can eat and drink, the better. Once we get rid of those, the next most problematic foods are the white carbohydrates, the white bread, white pasta, things like pastries as well. You know, if you're eating a lot of stuff like sausage rolls or quiches or samosas, they've all got that white flour around them that will really spike your blood glucose. As well as the quality of the carbohydrates, we also want to think about the quantity of the carbohydrates. No matter how slow release it is, if we eat platefuls and platefuls and platefuls of brown rice, for instance, it will have an effect on our blood sugar. There's only so much that our body can healthily cope with. And in order to sort of blunt the effect of carbohydrates on our blood sugar, if we eat them along with some protein and some fat, the way we would do in most of our meals, that will reduce the effects of the carbohydrates. So we tend to have our meals with protein or with fat, or we ought to, but sometimes when we snack, we end up snacking on very carby things without anything to balance it out. So having something like a small handful of nuts whenever you have a carbohydrate rich snack like a piece of fruit can help to provide that balance. And the last thing we talked about last week was how this leads us to a sort of an idealized way to balance our meals if we're trying to lose weight. So this, produced by my professional body, is for people to whom nutritional therapists aren't giving personalized advice. This is a sort of a generalized advice that might work for lots of people. And you'll notice that when it comes to the carbohydrates on this plate, that's the top right-hand sort of sector of the plate, it's taking up less than a quarter of our plate, with things such as rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, other grains like oats. They're only taking up less than a quarter of our overall food intake. The bottom right-hand section is made up of protein, and it's important to eat a decent amount of protein regularly, ideally every time with every meal, so that because this sort of blunts that rise in blood sugar, and it also keeps us feeling full. So having enough protein, it's very filling, very satisfying, can prevent people from overeating in other ways. So if you don't eat enough protein, you can end up feeling very, very hungry. The whole left-hand side of the plate is taken up with vegetables of one sort or another. And this is because if you're trying to lose weight, there are lots of ways in which you can lose weight in the short term, but with most of them, you end up getting so far, and then you'll put the weight back on again, because it's very difficult to sustain not eating enough food long term. It goes against all our evolutionary instincts as humans to sort of keep going in calorie deficit, as it's called, not eating enough food. If you are restricting some things in your diet, like restricting the amount of those starchy carbohydrates, but not wanting to restrict the overall amount of food that you eat so that you don't feel unsatisfied and hungry all the time, then filling up half your plate with not starchy vegetables is a way to really fill you up, because the fiber actually physically stretches your stomach and keeps you full. You think you're eating plenty, you're getting lots of nutrients from those vegetables. So even though you might be cutting back on your energy intake from food, you're not cutting back on your nutrient intake from food. So you don't end up ill or with nutrient deficiencies. So this is a sort of a guide plate to how a way to structure meals to gradually lose weight. So it's not a crash diet, but you can keep eating like this till you reach a target weight, and then perhaps adjust that right hand side of your plate so that you're eating a little bit more carbohydrates, a little bit less protein. That image, as I say, is produced by my professional body, but there are quite a few, actually, there are quite a few physical plates out there that you can buy that can help you to remember this. I've got one example here, which this one is from Matalan, and it costs about, I bought this a while ago, I think it's only about £2.50 or £3, and it's a proper ceramic plate, and it's just divided into vegetables on this side, and this has a quarter of the plate as protein and a quarter of it as carbohydrates, or starchy carbohydrates, things like potatoes and rice. And this is quite a nice one to use and to actually set your food out on until you get into the habit of knowing how much these different quantities of foods look like, because we don't always structure our meals so that we separate out all the foods, but you can use one of these plates to do that for a little while until you get used to what your meals would look like if you structure them like this. And I always say this is quite a large plate, that we don't want to be going out to the edge of the plate. We want to be not going over the writing, just going over the pictures. But I think...
Joan, sorry to interrupt. We won't be able to see that on the recording, because obviously it's sharing your screen at the moment. So yeah, I mean, if you just...
Yeah, let me stop sharing. So yes, just to show for the recording, this is the plate I was talking about. This one's from Matalan. I think various other places, including possibly Next, but other retailers as well, sell these plates. This whole side of it is vegetables. We've got our quarter of protein and our quarter of starchy carbohydrates. So you can use it to measure out foods until you know a bit more instinctively what it's like to eat in those sort of proportions. Don't cover over the writing going around the outside, just cover over the pictures, because it's quite a big plate. But yeah, that's quite a nice one, and just a good tip to to remind you what to do until it becomes a bit more of a habit. I wanted to move on from that and just talk a bit more about where a lot of people, where this sort of doesn't work for people and why it might not. So common things that I see ways people eating is that if they're eating a lot of processed foods, like the image on the left is someone in the section of a grocery store where everything is packets and jars and tins and containers, as opposed to on the right where someone's buying whole foods in their natural state. And you know, if you're doing that, then it's very hard to work out which out of the food that you're eating, it's very hard to work out how much is carbohydrate or how much is protein, how much is fat, because it's all mixed together for you. It's all worked out. Sorry, it's all muddled in together, and you don't want to have to get into calorie counting or counting these different nutrients and working out how much of what you're eating. It's much easier, as well as being much healthier for you, if you buy your food as much as possible in its whole natural state and cook it yourself. I also see sort of people making maybe not mistakes, but errors in the kinds of processed foods that they buy, thinking that these are wholesome and have a healthy label or are marketed as healthy, and that somehow, therefore, these foods will be good for them when it comes to weight loss. And this is particularly the case when it comes to things like cereals, actually. So on the left, I've got nothing against, say, Jordan's in particular. I could have picked any granola brand, but granola is something that, and a lot of breakfasts in particular are things that people think of as being very healthy. The whole grain start to the day, a really good way to start your day. This particular granola has about 17 grams of sugar per 100 grams, and it's not unusual at all in having that much sugar from the dried fruit and the flavorings that are in it. You would be much better off in most cases putting together your own mix of porridge and fruit and nuts and seeds, or some yogurt and fruit and nuts and seeds, rather than buying anything that's ready made. I know it's a little bit more effort, but then you are in control of how much of those different macronutrients, the carbs, the fat, the protein that you add in, and you're not being tricked in any way into consuming more sugar than you thought was in a particular product, or you're not being misled by its healthy marketing or healthy labeling. So it sort of comes down to just eating real food, because when we eat processed foods, they're, people who manufacture food, because it's like almost an industrial process of manufacturing food, they want to sell more of their product, and foods are very carefully designed these days to hit what's called the bliss point, that combination of amounts of sugar, fat and salt that make foods what's called hyper palatable, so really, really tasty, so that we want to eat more of them, and so that food manufacturer will sell more of their food. So when we eat processed foods, not only are we inadvertently eating ingredients that we might not be happy to add if we were adding them from scratch in our own kitchen, we're also being manipulated in a way where our brains are being manipulated to crave more of that food. And lots of hunger signaling pathways in our body are being manipulated very, very cleverly and very carefully by processed food brands. The picture on the top right is a book called The Dorito Effect, which explores in detail how flavors and this chemical concocting of the bliss point really make us want to buy more and more foods that are actually in and of themselves very nutrient poor. So Doritos are a classic example where it's sort of, it's just carbohydrate without very many minerals, vitamins, not much fiber, nutritionally not very much going for it, yet it tastes so Doritos, if you're into them, taste so incredibly good because they are designed to. So just as foods have become less and less nutritionally dense, so they have become more and more hyper palatable. So our ancient ancestors living in the wild would be drawn to foods that tasted good because those are the ones that would provide the most nutritional benefit. In our scientific trying to manipulate and engineer food nowadays, all that's been turned on its head. So we can no longer rely on our own sense of taste and flavor to discern which foods are best for us. The only way in which we can get out of that trickery and trap is in consuming as little as possible of the processed foods. So as I said, there's this bliss point that's looking at sugar, salt and fats, but also not only do these things taste good, but when we've got a combination of refined carbohydrates and unhealthy fats, so think, donuts that are fried, they're just flour products that are deep fried, or samosas or something like that are deep fried. This combination, it's quite a lethal combination of refined carbohydrates and unhealthy fats. They actually lead to what's called insulin resistance in our body. insulin resistance happens as a precursor to type 2 diabetes, but you could be insulin resistant for a very long time before developing type 2 diabetes, or even without it progressing to type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance means that your body will be producing more and more insulin without it working properly. So insulin is not doing its job right. The body keeps producing more and more. And remember that when we produce more and more insulin, it's signaling our body to gain weight. So when we eat these unhealthy and quite unnatural combination foods of the fast carbs and the unhealthy fats, they promote weight gain through what they do to our hormone regulation, our insulin hormone regulation in the body. When we eat real food, and when peoples all over the world eat real food, they don't need to calorie count. They don't need to calculate how many calories they're burning walking around their farm or their work or their life during the day, and work that out with how much they're going to eat in the evening. Peoples who eat the traditional whole foods diet throughout the world tend to maintain a healthy body weight without the need to calculate calories in and calories out. So how does this work? Why don't people put on weight all the time if they're eating the way their ancestors always have done? Well, we have such a complex system of hunger control, appetite control, feeling full, that the hormones around hunger within our body are so tightly regulated by the body that if we eat, by and large, if we eat real foods, unprocessed foods, then our bodies will know when we are full. They will know, have a sense of whether we have exercised a lot, and therefore will eat to compensate for that. And all this happens without us having to calculate it. You know, if we all really needed to calculate our calories in and calories out the way we're led to believe, then humanity wouldn't have survived so long. But this should all happen just by our inbuilt feedback loops in our brain, between our brain and our body, of working out how much we need to eat. The point I'm trying to make is that processed food, by tricking our brain, by making us crave more because of the way the food is engineered, rather than because of how many nutrients it gives us and how our body senses it's full, we're tricked instead to crave rather than to have a true sense of how much we need. So this overrides all our body's built-in control mechanisms. So it's very difficult for us to know whether we really are genuinely needing more calories and need a chocolate biscuit, or whether we just feel that, you know, it's a bit moreish and we would just crave another chocolate biscuit. So the more processed foods we eat, the more difficult it is to rely on your own instincts of whether or not you're hungry or need to eat more. The other thing that's happened in recent years that may have contributed to the obesity epidemic is the sort of phenomenon of snacking. I remember back in the 70s, you know, when there used to be an ad for Milky Way, was it? And it was the snack that your children could eat before meals that wouldn't ruin their appetite. And that was quite a new tagline for an ad, really, because of course before then it was known that if you ate between meals, you wouldn't eat your meals properly because it would interfere with appetite and this inbuilt control of how much you would want to eat. So presumably it used to be that if people give their children a snack in the afternoon, they knew that they wouldn't want to eat their dinner in the evening. Whereas now there's sort of constant grazing and snacking, and it doesn't seem to affect people's willingness to eat the next meal, because we're all told that we need snacks all the time in order to keep us having enough energy, enough focus, enough clear thinking to be able to go about our lives. That if we don't snack frequently, we might all keel over and collapse from having low blood sugar. This isn't at all the case. Snacking is quite a modern phenomenon. And if we eat meals, and this is key, if we eat meals that are structured so that they keep our blood sugar steady, so eating in accordance with the plate diagram that I showed you earlier, If we do that over and over again, gradually we should find that we don't really need to eat or snack between meals, because we don't get that high and then followed by a low in blood sugar that leaves us feeling shaky or hungry or a bit faint in between meals. If you eat plenty of fiber, plenty of protein, and some healthy fat with each meal, you should easily be able to go 4 to 5 hours between meals without needing a snack. That doesn't happen overnight, and if you're a snacker and feel that you need snacking at the moment, then the place to start in trying to break out of that cycle is, as I mentioned last week, to begin making sure that you are definitely having a good portion of protein with each of your meals. It's the single best thing you can do to keep you feeling full from one meal to the next. Now, apart from the fact that if we snack, we just tend to eat more over the course of a day, then every snack that we eat, even if it doesn't really raise our blood sugar much, we will have a slight increase in insulin just as a response to eating, and a slight increase in inflammation in our body just as a result of eating. So every time we increase insulin, we put off the body's ability to get into a more fasted state in which we can burn our own body fat as fuel, which, remember, is what weight loss is. Weight loss is burning our own body fat as fuel. So every time we snack, we sort of prevent our body from doing that. We tell our body, it's okay, I can eat anytime, there's plenty of food around, you don't need to go to, don't go to the trouble of using up my stores of energy. Might need that later. There might be a time of famine coming, but at the moment there's plenty of food, so let's not burn the body fat. These are the hardwired evolutionary messages that go from our brain to our body when we're eating food frequently. If you remember me talking about the digestive system as well a few weeks ago, it's not great for our digestion either to be snacking all the time. Our body and our digestive system just needs a bit of a break every so often to divert its resources to other things like repairing our body or looking after our immune system, rather than always being focused on digesting and absorbing our food. So there's multiple reasons why snacking isn't a good idea. And although you'll see, the heading of the slide, no such thing as a healthy snack, is really because of that, because you'll see, healthier snack options advertised in magazines, on TV, certainly on social media, have such and such snack instead of a biscuit. It's a much healthier option. Whilst that might be true to a degree, the ideal really is not to be eating so frequently throughout the day, because it just does tend to lead to weight gain just by virtue of the fact that we're eating more and we're increasing insulin all the time. So yeah, there are some snacks, of course, that are better or worse than others, but really the healthy thing is not to snack at all. The other thing that can mess up our appetite signaling mechanisms is being thirsty. So our brain can very, very easily confuse hunger and thirst signals. So often if you're feeling a craving for a snack or eating some more, it's a good idea to just promise yourself that you'll wait for 10 minutes, have a full glass of water, and see if honestly reassess if you are still hungry 10 minutes after drinking that, because often, as I say, these signals can get mixed up in the brain, and we can be a little bit dehydrated without actually being aware of feeling thirst. By the time we get to the point of feeling thirsty, we're already quite dehydrated. We should be drinking before we feel thirst. So maybe that signal is not yet thirst, but it's still a sign that we need to take in more water rather than more food. A lot of people don't drink enough anyway, so it's no bad idea, just if you feel hungry, a little bit peckish, or you just feel like eating something, to see if you're thirsty instead. What counts as to get you hydrated? The best options are plain water. If you don't like plain water, then rather than having a soft drink, which is either going to have sugar in it or else an artificial sweetener that's going to keep you craving sugar, then you can try flavoring your water with by having, like in this picture, a jug with berries or mint leaves or lemon slices or cucumber slices or something in it, or else you can get infuser bottles, like drinking bottles that do the same thing. So, you know, your usual bottle, but it will have a little pod at the top that will have a space for you to put, say, berries in, with a grill at the bottom, so that when you drink the water through the top of the bottle, it will go past the berries and flavour the water. So that's quite easy to do this these days, whether you're at home drinking from a jug of water or out and about with an infuser bottle. Herbal teas are another good way, especially in cold weather, of increasing your fluid intake without having any sugar or caffeine, because caffeine, of course, is a mild diuretic, so you end up losing more water than you drink with caffeine. But herbal teas are naturally decaffeinated. They're a great choice for the winter when you maybe don't feel like drinking cold water as much. And there's a huge variety. I used to think that it was just sort of quite grassy in a way, tasting teas like chamomile, but there are so many options available now for herbal teas, and there are sometimes variety packs sold where you can get you can try a few and see which you like. So remember that soft drinks are just empty calories and are really not going to help in that regard with getting to a healthy body weight, because they don't really make you feel full once you process the liquid in them. And they will add to your blood sugar response, and sugar-free soft drinks just keep you craving sugar. And also some people's digestion really suffers as a result of sugar-free soft drinks. I had one client who had quite bad IBS symptoms and had to know whenever she went out where the toilets were and that sort of thing. And we've tracked it back to being aspartame in Diet Coke that was just a major trigger for her digestive system to contract and become a bit overactive. So for some people, cutting out the artificial sweeteners can really help their digestive system as well. Another type of drink, of course, alcohol, will also affect our weight for several reasons. So being a toxin to the body has to, will prioritize getting rid of metabolizing and detoxing from alcohol before metabolizing other nutrients. So it sort of adds to the load that has to be dealt with, if you like. It's quite calorific. I don't know if you remember when I was talking about fat last week, I was talking about the amount of calories in a gram of the different nutrients. So carbohydrates and proteins both have 4 calories per gram of them. So if you had a gram of pure carbohydrate, that would give you 4 calories. Alcohol has 7 calories per gram. And again, you're not getting any nutritional benefit from it. So you're getting quite a lot in the way of calories, more than you would do with a sugary drink, actually. So that's just adding to your calorific load. It doesn't fill us up like food does. And of course, probably more significantly, it really affects your food choices. So I like to joke that when people come in after a big night out, you know, if they're hungry, they never come in and say, oh, I've had a really good night out, I'd really love a salad now. You know, they tend to come home and pick not the best food choices, and perhaps not what they would eat when they were sober either. So because of its relaxing effects on us, we can get really relaxed about what food we might eat when we have alcohol. And alcohol also affects our sleep in a big way. And we might think that we get off to sleep really quickly when we've had something to drink, but actually the quality of our sleep is much, much poorer. And this in turn has a knock-on effect on our food choices, but also in how our body's metabolism responds to food, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. But so people will ask which alcoholic drink is best. And I guess just in terms of the calories in it, then neat spirits, I suppose, are the least calorific, but then people tend to put sugary mixers with it. There's the question of isn't red wine quite good for you with the antioxidants in it? But it really, these are all just trying to play around at the edges of the fact that alcohol in general is not going to help you by and large get to a healthy body weight if you're not there already, and is best minimized or avoided. And that's just, being honest. There's no point in me saying it any other way, even though it makes me into, it might feel like a spoil sport thing to say, but there's no point pretending otherwise if you really do want to lose weight. Just a bit of a roundup at the end of some of the other factors that can apply to individuals who are struggling to lose weight. And these can be, they may or may not apply to you depending on your circumstances, but if one of these does apply to you, it's probably really important to deal with it. And the first is eating in accordance with your body clock. So there's quite a lot of evidence around shift workers and how even being awake at times of the day other than what fits in with our natural circadian rhythm, how that has adverse impacts on multiple health factors. And one aspect of this is how it affects weight. So I'm just going to quote from a 2020 study which looked at night shift workers compared with people who work during the day, and they were looking at how working night shifts influenced weight. So night shift workers sleep less hours, they had higher weight, higher body mass index, and abdominal circumference, that's the weight around the middle, when compared to the day shift workers. Night shift workers had almost 3 times higher association with abdominal obesity, so that's fat around the middle, independent of their age or their gender, than day shift workers. Night shift workers had lower sleep duration during working days, and they also had what's called a higher level of social jet lag, and so that's being out of sync obviously with your family and your friends around you. And social jet lag had an association on its own with obesity. So being overweight just by eating at the wrong times of the day, when our body is not ready to metabolize that food well, has an impact on being overweight. So you may not be working shifts, but thinking about your eating habits, are you prone to eating quite a lot just before you go to bed at night? That's effectively not really eating in keeping with our body clock, because we really should be eating during daylight hours. So when you think of how our ancestors who didn't have electric lighting, they wouldn't really have wasted resources on trying to light an area to cook in darkness. So we should be doing most of our eating during waking hours, and studies into how effectively different organs in our body work at different times of the day would support this, that our digestion is much more efficient earlier in the day or around the middle of the day. So the old saying about breakfasting like a king, lunching like a prince, and dining like a pauper sort of relates to this, where I think it's much better for us to be eating more of our daily food intake earlier in the day. A lot of people now will try and do time restricted eating, where they squeeze all their eating into a set number of hours. So this can vary. Some people will try and eat all their day's food intake within 8 hours, tends to be one of the shorter durations, leaving 16 hours where they don't eat anything. Or you could do eating everything within 10 hours and having 14 hours overnight when you don't eat anything. Some of these are not too hard to do, but it does seem to make a difference which hours you eat in. So say you were eating during 10 hours a day, then it would probably be better to do that between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. than to not eat anything until midday, but keep eating till 10 o'clock at night. We're much better eating earlier in the day. Our body generally likes us to have something to eat earlier in the morning when we wake up, and a lot of people with digestive problems as well will find it harder to eat in the evening, that maybe food lies on their stomach a bit. So yeah, shift work is the sort of extreme, but for most of us, not eating until late in the evening can be really helpful. I mentioned sleep earlier, and sleep has a really interesting effect on our food choices, but also our body's response to the set food that we eat. So if you are sleep deprived, you're much more likely, if you do manage to lose weight, to actually lose muscle rather than to lose fat. So when we lose weight, we want to maintain our lean muscle mass and to lose fat mass. That doesn't really happen so well if you're sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation, even mild sleep deprivation, messes with our those control systems that I talked about that we've got, regulating our hunger and our satisfaction with food. So if we're mildly sleep deprived, our hunger hormone levels increase, and that's only if we lose just a few hours a night. When they've studied people under controlled conditions and let them sleep for a full 8 hours and then restricted their sleeping, so they only maybe got 4 hours a night, they found that when given free rein over how much food that they would eat, that the subjects who are sleep deprived will eat up to 50% more calories the next day than those who've had a full night's sleep. Even when both groups were allowed as much food as they wanted, the people who'd had enough sleep tend to moderate themselves, whereas we seem to lose that, again, that regulation of our hunger signaling when we're sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation actually changes how we respond, particularly to carbohydrates. So our blood sugar and insulin go much more all over the place than, to just put it in layman's terms, than when we have enough sleep. So even eating the same meal, even if we don't eat extra calories after being sleep deprived, our metabolic response to it isn't as good if we're sleep deprived, and we're more likely to put on weight. And when we do put on weight, if we're sleep deprived, it tends to go around the middle rather than elsewhere in our body where it might not be so harmful. So if you don't sleep well and you're also trying to lose weight, you might think that the two are separate things, but it's definitely worth at least doing everything that you can to try and make sure that you're sleeping in a dark environment, in a cool environment, in a calm environment, perhaps not being on your computer screen till just before you go to bed, and doing all those good sleep practices like winding down with a nice bath before bed, all those nice things that we can do to get us relaxed before sleep, because it could be having an effect on your attempts to lose weight as well. In the same way, I see sometimes I see people who are really, really trying hard to lose weight and are actually getting themselves adding to the stress on their body in the process. And if we're under a lot of stress, it varies significantly from person to person, but it can be a mechanism by which people put on weight. So some people, when they're very stressed, will lose a lot of weight, and other people will gain weight. And it's not just because of comfort eating that comes with stress, although that can be part of it too. Again, how we regulate our blood sugar when we're stressed really comes into it. So for some people, dealing with how they manage stress in their lives can be really important when it comes to trying to lose weight as well. Another perhaps obvious point, or maybe not, if you've been trying to lose weight for a while and haven't been able to, it's always worth going to the GP and asking for a check on your thyroid function. The thyroid being a gland that sits in our neck, which controls all aspects of our metabolism and how fast our metabolism runs. There is some overlap, some comorbidity as it's called, between particularly autoimmune forms of arthritis and thyroid disease. So it's worth getting checked and being persistent about that if you suspect that there's something wrong, not quite right with your metabolism, particularly if you have a family history of thyroid disease. If you had it tends to be more in females than men, although not exclusively so. So if you had a mother or a grandmother with thyroid disease, definitely get checked. And there are problems, I guess, with how the NHS screens for thyroid disease. So if you're not satisfied with being told that your results are normal, I just say ask for a second opinion or seek help from a naturopath or a nutritionist or a private doctor or someone who might be able to give you more guidance and order a fuller panel of blood tests. But thyroid can absolutely make it really difficult. Having an underactive thyroid can make it really difficult to lose weight because your metabolism is just running much, much slower. So it's always worth checking it out. Finally, I just wanted to speak a little bit about exercise and weight loss. There are multiple studies that show that for most people doing a moderate amount of exercise, that exercise does not help you lose weight. Exercise has multiple benefits for your health, so I would never for a moment suggest that you don't try and move your body, but it does not, for most people, help them lose weight. We've been fed this argument of you must expend more calories than you eat in order to lose weight. And if you don't, it's somehow your fault, that you're not being active enough, that you're eating too much, that you're lazy. And it's just not as simple as that. It's much more complicated. Unless you're exercising a lot, and by a lot, I mean around about 2 hours a day of aerobic exercise, that exercise is not going to contribute to your weight loss, because what happens is that, as I said, we've got all these inbuilt mechanisms in our body to make sure that we don't starve, because throughout most of our human evolution, we were more prone to starve than we were to put on weight. So our body really, in most cases, wants to hang on to weight. So if we exercise, what happens is we'll come home from a walk, a swim, the gym, wherever we've been, we'll come home and without realizing it, we will expend less energy. So we'll either think quite consciously that we deserve to slump in front of the sofa and therefore burn less energy, or else subconsciously we will just move a little bit less, and all those little bit less movements will actually save us more or less the amount of calories that we have just burnt on our walk, on our swim, at the gym. So just by fidgeting less and just moving around less, our bodies have ways of adapting to the exercise that we have done. So exercise can, help with your mood, can help to detoxify your body, can help you to feel better, can help you to balance your hormones, can help do all sorts of things, but it doesn't really help you lose weight. However, if you are trying to lose weight, an exercise that it is quite good to do is to do what this gentleman in the photograph is doing, and to do some kind of resistance or muscle strengthening training, either with resistance bands, as he's doing, by using the resistance of water, like swimming, by using your own body weight, by doing things like squats or press-ups, or by using light weights, anything that is going to put some resistance on your muscles and help to strengthen your muscles. Because if you're trying to lose weight, firstly, you want to maintain muscle mass. You want to lose fat. You don't want to lose muscle mass. So you want to keep stressing your muscles a little bit in whatever way you're able to, and to maintain their mass. Also, when we exercise big muscle groups, they're a really good sink, if you like, for glucose to go into. Our muscles eat up glucose to power them when we are exercising them. So doing muscle strengthening exercises can really help stabilize our blood glucose, which can help, again, in not making us want to overeat, and not making us feel hungry, and in not making us produce lots of insulin, which helps us put on weight. So whatever you are able to do in order to strengthen your muscles, working according to your ability, will probably still be beneficial in terms of the type of exercise that you should be doing to lose weight. Still do other exercise if you love it, and because it will have, as I say, all those other health benefits. But I just hear so many people saying that, I wanted to lose weight. I haven't lost any weight this month, but I've stopped running because it's been bad weather, and that's why I've put on weight. Most weight loss will come from your diet and not from your exercise. So it's really important to be clear that whilst exercise is amazingly good for you and better than any medical intervention you can have, it's not going to significantly contribute to weight loss. There's just far too much evidence now to the contrary. So we could probably stop at that point and see if there's any questions in particular about weight. Just to say that next week, at Diane's request, I think I was going to talk about how to buy and store and prepare your food so that you don't lose nutrients from it, or cook particular foods in the best way to maintain as much nutrient content in them as possible. So that's next week. I'll move away from weight loss. So I guess if we've probably got a few minutes, Phil, haven't we? If there's any questions about weight loss.
Porridge for breakfast. Is porridge good for you for breakfast?
Well, it's a slow release carbohydrate, so it doesn't spike your blood glucose quite so fast, but still, it is still a carbohydrate that will in the end. So it can be good, but it needs to be balanced ideally with, some porridge and some nuts or seeds or some kind of protein with it. And there is quite a difference actually between having the jumbo oats porridge, which require a bit of effort for your body to break them down. They're much better for you than the instant type of oats, and something really fine like Ready Brek will be metabolized into sugar much faster.
Yeah, we always eat fruit with porridge.
Yeah, which is
fresh fruit,
which is nice in the morning. Just maybe reduce the amount of porridge slightly and add in some nuts or some seeds or something, and then the fat and the protein will just stabilize the blood sugar a bit from it.
Okay, so thank you. What was the other thing? No. That was it. Yeah. What was
yeah, you were talking about how the night shift workers were affected. Quite a detrimental effect on them there. But now everybody's working from home. I mean, I find myself working odd times of the day and night. So, what should I try and normalise it to just working during the day or something, or what?
Well, I think there's two separate issues there, at least. There's the when do you eat your food within that, and then also about sleep patterns. So particularly with a lot of us working on computers all the time, the blue light that's emitted from the blue light that's emitted from computers and from mobile phones is our brain perceives it as being very like the light that we get through the atmosphere in the morning. So if we're so it switches off our sleep hormone production if we get a lot of that blue light. So if we're working on computer screens late at night, it can stop or make it more difficult for you to get off to sleep. So if you can, not working online right up till you go to sleep, having an hour or two beforehand. If you really need to be online right up till sleep time, you can get blue light filters and things to go on phones and computers that can not block your production of sleep hormones so much. But then there's when you eat as well. And yeah, it's definitely better to try and eat during daylight hours or as close to it as possible. Plus, it's good just to be in a pattern of eating at regular times so that the digestive system knows when it's going to be asked to digest foods and is a bit more prepared for that. So trying to keep in a routine generally is quite a good thing.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's just, obviously from working in an office for 30 odd years, you get used to eating when you get home. So it's always dark at winter time, isn't it? So
I mean, the evening meal eating is the one actually that's so dictated by our working hours and social things, like when our family's home and when we can eat. So it's not always possible to eat it earlier than 7:30, 8 o'clock. I get that, particularly if you're coming out of London, but a little bit earlier than that does tend to be a bit better for us.
Well, I suppose I should try that now. Now I've got the option. All right, thanks, Jane. Excellent.
Okay, you're welcome.
I just wanted to ask about when